And welcome back to Taxation is Theft, the show that talks about all the ways the government is ripping you off, broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube from an underground bunker deep within the jungles of Mexico. I'm Dan, Taxation is Theft Berman, former president for candidate, sorry. I had a beer earlier today because I was on the Libertarian happy hour, and now I can't talk. Former candidate for president of the United States, currently in the race for governor of Texas. And today I have a really awesome guest, Raymon Doane, who is running for U.S. Senate in Colorado. And oddly enough, as a libertarian, he works in the government tax office. This is going to be really interesting. An amazing guest. Happy to have him on. And of course, before we get started, I want to ask you, if you're watching the live streams right now, make sure you like and share, start a watch party, comment, ask your questions. We will be watching them. And of course, head over to taxationistheft.info and support us by buying a really awesome hat or t-shirt. Everything that you do, all of our profits that we collect as greedy corporate capitalists, goes to our efforts of spreading counter propaganda against the government around the world to end taxation for everybody. So please head on over to taxationistheft.info and do that for us. But for now, on to the show. Raymon, how's it going?
Getting off of work and coming on here, enjoying the whole campaign season. I'm ready for Tuesday to come.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So let's talk about that first. You're running an election right now, and this is your first time running, right?
This is my third time running.
Third time.
First ran back in 2016 as a state senate. In my area, I was a Republican at that time, a registered Republican. And then in 2018, I actually changed affiliations like right after 2016 election. And in 2018, I ran for a United States rep as a Libertarian in the city and county of Denver. So nice. This is my third time running.
And so now you've upped it again to U.S. Senate, which is even a little bit more difficult than a U.S. rep. What were your? I mean, hey, I ran for president, so I can't say anything about having pie in the sky dreams. But how's it going this time, and how did you do last time? Are you finding it easier? Are you reaching more people?
Easier, no. Just because Colorado, and I'm sure since you're in Texas, Colorado's a big state. Texas is much bigger, but Colorado's still a pretty large state. You have to worry about like mountains. You got to worry about the eastern plains. After you get across the mountains, you got to worry about the western slope. So there's quite a variety here, even with the Front Range, like Denver, the metropolitan area, is dealing with traffic in general. Most of the time I spend on the campaign trail is in my car. So after Tuesday, I will be gladly like walking just to like short distances, enjoying fresh air, not driving, all that stuff. But it being harder, that's really about it. It's just reaching people. The pandemic, I would say, has made it harder than anything else, just because it's hard to really schedule events. When I look up places to try to actually get a decent venue, see if I can, schedule something, meet up with people, a lot of the times I really can't. They're saying, oh, there's a large group of people going to come. And in reality, I don't know. I am a libertarian candidate. So if I do put an event out there, it could be hit or miss. It could be 2 people show up, could be nobody shows up, or it could be, 20 or 30 or possibly 50. There was one point in time where it was actually a good 30 people, actually wanting to speak to me, which I was happy. That's very ecstatic, but getting that venue is difficult. Just maneuvering around this whole situation has made it a little time consuming. Just a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of back and forth. And you don't necessarily get the answer that you want just with venues, let alone with the phone calls of people cussing you out, saying, oh, you can't win, jump out the race, even though it's kind of too late now, because even if I did, my name will still be on there, so I wouldn't do anything.
Right. That's like such an idiotic thing to say. Like, yeah, you're not going to win, jump out of the race. Like, like, okay, you don't support me, vote for whoever you want. What is me being in the race like? How does that interfere with your ability to vote for whoever you want? It's like
Exactly.
such a. It's funny they say we're selfish because we're stealing votes, and it's like you're selfish for saying like, yeah, we shouldn't do something that really doesn't affect you.
Like we're
It's
putting our voice out there. We want to be heard, and I find it concerning that majority of the public does utter that message. They're like, "Oh, you can't win," or you're stealing the votes. It's a wasted vote, and it's when I hear from the Republican Party, especially considering the fact that the Republican Party was a former third party. It concerns me deeply just because they want to throw out Democrats' history a lot. And I say this quite often, but if you're going to speak about somebody else's history, but you don't know your own, that's not only a lack of knowledge, but that's pure ignorance. You cannot talk about somebody else because that's hypocrisy at its finest. So when I hear Republicans say that, it's really disheartening because I was one, and I'm like, wow, some of these people, I talk to on a either frequent basis, saying like, hey, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do, and I know their values are still in the same place, but that type of, again, ignorance,
yeah,
I just can't allow worse and worse.
it's interesting too because you have and this is like one of the dynamics of just having a really large organization. You've got some people who know the history and they're absolutely intentionally avoiding it because they just want to sling dirt at the other side. But then you have so many people that especially they're younger, they come along, they don't know the history. Nobody ever teaches it to them. They don't see any purpose in looking it up, and they just want to regurgitate the rhetoric, and you end up with like this kind of like sheep following, and there's really like inside, and then there's like some people who are well intentioned, some people who are like ready to slit throats. Like the dynamic in a large organization is just so many different types of people. Um, it's really interesting, but that's also like how we have. I mean, we live in a society. That's kind of like our dynamic as a whole, right? Because even without these parties, you're still going to have people who are doing these same things to kind of achieve whatever they're trying to achieve, whether it's power and control or money or whatever. So I don't know. I find it really interesting.
Yeah, it's somewhat, well, I'm not going to say somewhat, it is disheartening because we have allowed ourselves, over time, as a society to get to this, place where greed, power, corruption actually succeeds. And in politics, out of all the things that are competitive, like you look at sports, basketball, football, baseball, whatever sport, those are the only ones where the winners and losers should absolutely be purely defined. When it comes to politics, it shouldn't be red, it shouldn't be blue, it shouldn't even be gold. As much as I would love to see, libertarian candidates, myself included, in office, it's really the people that should win. And that's where I really am glad that I was able to learn about the Libertarian Party, because it's not about me. It's about all of us making sure that we promote principles, especially the non-aggression principle and voluntarism, and understand just how people work. If we're going to say, I guess I can use a Bible quote, something my dad told me, if man is inherently full of sin. So if you know people are going to do bad stuff, the best thing that you should allow yourself to have the opportunity to have is really the structure, the foundation, just the whole an environment where you can alleviate not only your mistakes but someone else's. And right now, that's not the case with the overreach of government.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And I want to say this because I know there are a lot of um, well, man, how do I say this? There's a big divide between people who follow religion and people who follow government. Um, and I know there's a lot of libertarians and anarchists who are very much atheists. But what I find really interesting is when you look at it, like you just gave a Bible quote, is that there's actually a lot that parallels with this about, because the libertarian philosophy is not just about making laws; it's about personal responsibility, and like moral and philosophical discussion and these types of things. And I think to some degree, and yeah, I mean, just as some political parties go overboard and some, I guess, philosophical studies go overboard, you have religions that go overboard too. But I think it's really important to point out that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm always interested to hear these quotes. I'm more of an atheist myself, but I'm always really interested to hear these quotes, because it's like, to me, it's like it really doesn't matter where it came from, or whether God wrote it on paper or anything like this, or what's really important to me is what are we talking about, and is it something that's important? Like, does it, if it came from man or God, it really doesn't matter. If it's right, it's right. So that's, I just had to throw that out there, because I know right now there's a lot of listeners who are like, they're reading Bible quotes. But yeah, and hopefully, I think I've opened up some minds of some of the viewers who have started to like listen to that more. But yeah, I think that's always really interesting to hear. But anyway, so yeah, are you feeling pretty good about the election? I mean,
No, I am a realist. I'm a pragmatic individual. I knew that, again, running as a third party candidate, it's going to be difficult, especially when there are multiple parties involved. Colorado, we are lucky enough to, have already a good established system where we encourage a lot of parties to run. So I know currently there are five parties essentially within the race, and then we have a couple writing candidates. Of course, the Democrat and Republican Party are in. There's the Libertarian Party, there's the Unity Party, and then there's another one that's approval voting, which ironically their only standpoint is just to promote approval voting. They don't really push forward any other substance or any other topics. So that's what they're there for. However, I am ecstatic because actually traveling the state, getting to meet people, I know we're making an impact. People are tired of, just hearing Republican this, Democrat that, and they want to actually hear and better yet see solutions implemented, because people always talk about, affordable housing or homelessness. Those things, I tell individuals, by definition, you're not going to necessarily get rid of homelessness just because, natural disasters could occur. We just had several huge fires, at least a good five huge fires within the state of Colorado. So if your home was burnt down, it's not that you're poor or you're jobless, but you are technically homeless. So by pure definition, you're not going to get rid of that. But when you try to tackle some of these other topics and you speak about the solutions, especially when it comes to free market, and allow people to understand that you can actually create the environment that you want in another city. You don't have to stay where you're at. And if you want to stay where you're at, well, look at the policies that have kind of shut you out of being able to provide a life for yourself. And, I guess we're going to get into taxes pretty soon here, but it's just all of these topics that when you speak to people, they're like, wow, I was just hearing CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and it's just mudslinging. There's really no dialogue for an actual discussion on how do we actually solve these problems. And ironically, when you go to like community events and speak to nonprofit organizations, it even seems like that mudslinging goes to them too, because they're essentially lobbying to a certain extent. They really shouldn't be, but they are essentially lobbying for these elected officials to get government money to give to them, so they can help people, but by the time they get donations, by the time they get these grants, by the time they do all of this lobbying and this efforts, you might be able to help 5 families, which I know those 5 families will be happy.
Right.
But the 50 families that you could have helped if the government was actually efficient, one, or two, at least reduced to a level where it could help benefit people and only be allowed to act in certain situations. So for like murder, like investigations, stuff like that, I would say military. I'm not against, government interactions in any of those forms. So actually promoting efficiency, solvency, and being succinct in all of the talking points that we're actually making as a libertarian party, it's going out there, it's reaching out there, and people are ecstatic. So I think they're more happy about the discussions. They're not necessarily looking away, they're actually embracing it. So sadly to say, I think it's still going to take some time because there are people who, want to ignore. But I think eventually we will be there.
Right. Yeah, and it's you bring up some really good points. There was, I don't even want to say how I'm related to them, just because they could be found. But somebody who knows somebody I know just moved from California to Texas, and they're just talking about how excited they are to be fighting in Texas to turn it blue. And the reason they left California in the first place was the cost of housing was too high.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it wasn't high because it was California. It was high because it's a blue state. Those are the guys that are going to increase your taxes. It's absolutely ridiculous. But even more so, like that they would say, like oh, we don't want to turn Texas into a state that has the highest property tax. We don't want to turn Texas into a gun-free zone. We want to turn Texas blue, as if the most important thing to them is just the color, like their affiliation to their gang, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely insane, and that goes to your point about how they're not talking about policies. They're just talking about like oh yeah, no, this is my brand. This is the one that this is my affiliation, and therefore it's right, and everybody else must get out of my way or join me. Yeah, it's absolutely insane. So any progress we can do in doing that is really amazing. And like you said, and I know there's a lot of libertarians out there. Like it's interesting because there are libertarians who win elections. I had to look this up this morning because apparently Joe Jorgensen posted. Well, no, Nickelodeon is having like some kids vote thing, and their only options are Trump and Biden. And so Joe Jorgensen made a tweet that this isn't really fair. They're not showing the kids what our real democracy is about if they're if they're hiding the options that are going to be on all 50 ballots. And somebody else commented underneath. I can't remember who he was, but he's like from some organization. He's like, well, maybe if libertarians built a real party and started winning elections. Well, we're already winning elections, and I had to look up the site. There's the LP has a nice site, and there's like I think it was 288 elected libertarians, from like mayor to all these different positions. Like that's there, and the reality is people still believe no libertarian will ever get elected, and it's like that's you're hiding yourself from the truth, from like fact, which is absolutely insane. But at the same time, we also have this like consideration that the work we're doing is not like for nothing, right? I mean, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
like you talk about like having these conversations with people and opening their minds to the reality of what the political system is. That's a win. It doesn't matter if you win the election. What matters is that you're reaching all these people and showing them that people who are willing to run are willing to do different things. And every time we grow, we have more candidates, we get more votes, we wake up more people every time. And that's a win. And people make fun of that, like, oh yeah, you're winning, but you're like in third place. Like, there's that meme of the guy in third place, like drinking all the champagne, going crazy. And it's like, hey, if you win one person, you win one person. That's still a win. I mean, it's not like, yeah, Trump might win 55% of the United States vote. He's still not winning the world vote. He's still not king of the world. So, is that not a win? If all the other countries don't like him either. So it's, I think it's really interesting that people are still thinking like that. But I think, even through the things that we do, as we talk to more people, they kind of wake up to that. And I think more people see that. More people are willing to waste their vote. I started saying this, like, I think I said it at our debate in South Carolina, but like I'm starting to see a lot of people who are like, yeah, I wasted my vote today. I voted for Joe Jorgensen, and showing their little stickers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really awesome. I mean, like it's a rejection of this idea that, like, yeah, your vote's not going to matter. You're not going to win, and just saying like none of that matters ultimately.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think people really have to look at it from, now I don't want to say just a long game perspective because it makes it sound as if, they're not going to see the fruits of their labor, which, in reality, they might not. But I know we did a podcast not too long ago, yourself and myself, and I did one yesterday with Black voters for Joe Jorgensen. And something I try to bring up with people is when you look at a movement and when you're actually trying to do the right thing, it doesn't matter how long it takes. You're still just going to do the right thing. If you look at people being abolitionists, you know, myself being a Black gentleman, if people did not have the idea or the ideology that said slavery is wrong, that no individual should be essentially property to another person, then guess what? There's a possibility that slavery could still exist in America. Slavery still exists around the world. Libya after, and we could talk about foreign conflicts after Gaddafi was essentially taken out. Slavery started back up again in Libya, and that is, to me, a lot of people don't realize how much hard work it really is. And the best example, like I give a lot of quotes from my grandpa because he talked a lot of trash, and it's the best trash ever, and it's a lot of wisdom within some crappy quotes. But he said that if you build a house, it's going to take a very long time. When you put effort, when you put dedication, when you put labor into something, it's going to take a long time to build a house. However, to destroy it, it's just a blink of an eye. To ruin something, all it takes is just one action. But to build a house, it takes multiple actions. It's going to take time, it's going to take effort. When it comes to anything in life, when you put hard work into it, it's called hard work for a reason. It's not easy. You're not going to see instantaneous results. And I think that's a society problem because right now, when we have everything at our fingertips, when you can get information so quickly, when you can essentially get food, like just go to drive-through. I'm hungry. I'm gonna go to drive-through. You don't have to worry about cooking. You don't have to really worry about anything. If you have money, you can essentially get anything and everything done instantly. The difference is, in order to get money, you still got to put hard work in. And so, society, we're just not accustomed, I guess, as a whole, to seeing hard work really evolve. And in particular, especially once the Libertarian Party actually reaches true prominence, people are going to start to look at it like, oh, I should have been on the bandwagon when it gets successful. It's like a stock that somebody missed out on. They didn't believe in it when it was there. If you bought Amazon stock, if you bought Microsoft stock when it began, you were like, oh man, this company is trash. Because in reality, Amazon was not the best website when it first began. Microsoft was not the best product when it was first, for software wise, out there. And in now, billion-dollar companies. So if you invested in those companies back then, you dealt with all the hard work, you waited, you were patient. And I think that's what people have to realize, that they need to have patience with this hard work and continue to put that effort in.
Absolutely. And I think most of the people within the movement do have that patience, and it's really a matter of just kind of for now disregarding the naysayers, until it comes time to actually turn them over. But their time will come. Like they'll kind of fall in line once they see, all their friends and neighbors are starting to come to this understanding too. It's yeah, it's it really is interesting, and like you can say too that those types of really stubborn people, like you shouldn't be fighting with them anyway, because they're just wasting your time.
Mm-hmm.
They're a logical conversation is they're just not listening to it.
Yep.
You go and you talk to the people who will listen, and then there's more of you, and then you go out and you talk to more and more people, and just as it becomes more popular, it's these ideas are already getting difficult for the media to ignore. You've already got people in the mainstream parties, like the Republicans, who are claiming to be libertarians, and some of that's pandering, I'm sure. Some of that I know for a fact is pandering, but it's they're doing that for a reason, and you don't pander to a group of one person, right? You're not a U.S. senator pandering to some fringe philosophy that's only got 5 people in it. You're pandering because that's growing, and that's a lot of votes. So I think that's really interesting to see. So I want to talk, because I heard this and I was like, what? I was like, I must have misheard that. But you work for a tax office.
Yes, I work for Colorado Department of Revenue, and there. Actually, I guess technically I don't work in that division anymore. I work in Business Innovation Group, so I still deal with taxes because it's a weird, I guess, reallocation or restructuring, if you will, of the actual department. But I still deal a lot with taxes. So yeah, that's my profession. I actually got started with taxation when I was 18. I took the H&R Block tax class. I passed. I got my little college credit for it, and started helping people out with their taxes. Got my tax preparation identification number. I did take some hiatus just because at that time when I was in college, the recession was still going on. So I took the job that paid me the most whenever I could. And so I was just continuously applying for jobs. Like essentially, when I got hired, I was already looking for another one just so I could get more money. And after a while, once I moved back to Colorado fully, that's where more stability came into my life. I said I'm not going to be moving around anymore. I'm gonna stay here. I'm just, be around my family, stuff like that. And yeah, I got into government work. I actually worked for Denver elections, so elections division prior to actually working for Department of Revenue. And I applied there, got into taxes, and I did quit briefly. I want to say back in 2018 when I ran for Congress or U.S. Rep, and I came back. It was by happenstance. I was actually still preparing somebody else's taxes, and I was dropping them off. My boss came back and asked if I wanted to. My former boss, and then he became my boss again, and then I got promoted and went elsewhere. But yeah, tax. Yeah, I worked
So,
there.
are you? You're obviously not going door to door and putting a gun in people's face and making them give you the money. Um,
No,
but do you
no, no, no.
do you participate in any of the collection of the money? I
I
guess.
did. When I first started, so there's a variety of job duties and sections within any organization, whether it be private or public. But for me, I'll just say all the sections that I've been in. So the first one was dealing with all types of state taxes. So we're talking about income, sales, excise. The only one I did not touch was property tax because that's handled by the counties and it's overseen by the state. But I did go into the property tax division later on. I was a property tax specialist, and that was a much nicer position. I granted exemptions. So a lot of people actually liked me then.
Nice.
After I quit and came back, I went back into, dealing with all the taxes. I did get into the collection side later on. So issuing the bank levies, wage garnishments, a part of that was my job. And then now I'm a business analyst. So I essentially make sure that the system works so people can pay their taxes
So
or that the
when you were working with like the collection, was that before or after you became a libertarian?
that was after. That was after.
So how did you? I mean, well, let me ask you this first: is taxation theft?
I get this question a lot. So I'll say this from my point of view. I am not a fan of taxes. And I do believe it is theft when the money that you give to the government is not used for what you want it to be. So, yes, it can be. Now, this is where I guess even running for office, when I speak to people, because there are ironically people who want to pay taxes. So, when I say if it's voluntary, sure, yeah, by definition, I cannot say it's theft because they've agreed to give this money to them. Now, for other people, if they don't want to give, taxes to the government, at that point, I tell individuals they have two options. One, they can either move or and then try to avoid paying taxes that way, or they can actually vote to try to get these taxes reduced. And to kind of go a little bit further into the collection stuff, one of the reasons why I do enjoy taxes is because financial literacy is key. And as much as I would like to see taxes like very much reduced, even to the point where if I was out of a job, granted, I have several other jobs, I work 2 or 3 jobs, so that's not necessarily a problem for me, but it allows me to help them understand the way the system currently works. So when I did work in collections, and I'm just going to tell you like stories because obviously confidentiality here, we have like a series of ways and reasons why we go after people. So one, if you file your taxes and you owe money, and then you don't pay it, it goes into collections. But there is another way. Like if you don't file your taxes, what ends up happening, and for anybody that's a waged employee, uh, there are statements at the end of every year. So when you get your W-2, all of that information actually goes to the government. It's called a reconciliation statement. So that reconciliation statement is a way for them to fact check essentially and verify how much money was actually taken. So income tax, when you input all that information, so we'll say FICA taxes, your state income tax, all of that is already inside the system. That is required by law for them to submit that information to the government. So if you don't file your taxes, and if by chance it is calculated by discovery departments that you would have owed money, a tax return would actually be filed on your behalf, and there aren't any deductions or any credits calculated for you. So more than likely, you're going to owe. So having that knowledge, what I tell people, especially when that's the situation, I say, look, it's going to probably save you a whole lot more money if you file these tax returns. I know you don't want to do it, but if you file them, it's better for you to do that and pay maybe $200, $300 versus paying these thousands of dollars because there's penalties, there's interest, there's the tax that's actually calculated that you might owe. So if you actually filed your tax return and you don't owe any money, guess what? It's gone.
So
However, if you
let me ask you a question though, because I know I know the federal income tax pretty well, and I know that all the states, the way that the states impose and collect income tax is basically piggybacked onto the federal income tax. So,
some, yeah, some
well,
of them.
you'll see this. Like if you look through your tax code, you'll see like especially in the parts about definitions. That's usually where they say income means whatever it says in the federal law.
Mhm.
Taxable income means whatever it says in the federal law, and so this whole thing is like piggybacked onto that system. But let me ask you this question, because you want people to learn financial literacy, which is a great thing for people to learn, but at the same time, hey, yeah, if you don't pay something on time and you have a contractual obligation or a contractual allowance for somebody to charge a late fee for that or interest, then yes, that's fine. But what if the state doesn't have any real authority, and in fact the people who they're telling have to pay this tax never actually had to pay that tax in the first place? They're just sending letters, and these people get scared enough that they eventually submit to it and end up paying the money.
What do you mean? Like, how would I
So
respond?
yeah, I mean, how would you consider it? Because as you're talking, I hear it from both sides, right? I totally get it. Like, yeah, okay, I'm supposed to pay this money, and if I at least file the form, then I'll get my deductions, and then I'll have to pay less. But
Hmm.
that goes on the assumption that I should have to pay the income tax in the first place, and I want to ask. I'm sure you haven't read this book, "Shattering the Myths" by Dave Champion. Income
No.
tax shattering the myths. Okay,
Uh,
I want to send you a copy of this book. It's really awesome, and it explains the federal tax code and how this actually works. But basically, the income tax and who it's imposed on is not just every single person in the country. Like, that's not how the law works. And you can go through the case law, the constitutional history, the 16th Amendment, and all this other stuff. There's no legal authority for the federal or any state government to just pick a person and say, you're earning money, I want a piece of it. Because it's technically, even by court rulings, it's an excise tax, which means you have to be exercising a privilege, which means doing business with the government, or technically buying cigarettes or tobacco would be an excise tax because those are otherwise prohibited. Not that I agree with that law, but at least that
mm.
is the law. But when it comes to the income tax, the way that the actual law is written is that these people who are being coerced to paying it, really, most of them don't have to pay it in the first place.
Well, I can go a little further into that. By definition, yes, they don't have to participate. Now, the difference, and I guess this can get into a lot of nuances, and it depends on the individual what they would like to do and what they would not like to do. If you are participating in, I would say, a lot of acts in society, such as like driving, or you just live in a heavily metropolitan area, more than likely it'll be conducive for you to actually do this, to pay taxes. However, if you're in a rural area, if you're living off the grid, if you're trying to do whatever you want, in reality, it'll be a lot easier for you not to. And really, the punishment for not doing so would kind of be null and void for you, just because one, I'm not going to say that. And again, I am not a representative. I guess this is my disclaimer. I am not speaking on behalf, Department of Revenue or anything. But this is where I guess their philosophy, their livelihoods, like their lifestyle, it really depends on what they're doing. Because let's say, this is the best example. Let's say, you said that you live in Texas. So I know my sister lives in McKinney, Texas. So let's say you don't pay any property taxes, right? At least I know for out here in Colorado and out there, if you don't pay any property taxes, lien can be placed on your house. And if that lien's placed on your house, eventually, if you don't pay it for a long enough period of time, the state can actually take that, or not can, but they will take that property. And the difference is, if you live like in a rural area, the likelihood of them doing so would be slim, versus a metropolitan area and actually exercising force, which I know we're going to get into that. That's completely different, because they can make money off your house, because this is a metropolitan area. It's rising home values, et cetera, et cetera. So they can actually make money off of taking that property. So it's
Right, and it's
again, I understand like the philosophy, and I understand like the reality. So when we get into this and start speaking about force, this is where I would like people to understand, like especially the ones that came to see me, because by definition, what we're gonna do, like the government in general,
Hmm.
they would take the money. It's not gonna stop us from doing so. That's where I'm definitely running because I would like to change the tax code. When I speak about an equitable tax code, I understand that there are people who are not going to allow the income tax to be eliminated because Congress, if Joe Jorgensen was nominated president, I can assure you, if unless every single libertarian that's running right now on the legislative ticket actually was elected, it would be brought back. Probably even worse than what it is currently now. So what I want to promote is equitability and help people understand like not just the nuances, but understand that we can really do this on a voluntary basis and actually encourage people to say, like, you know what do you actually want the government to do? One, that should be point one. Ask that first. And then two, should they be doing it? So
Okay.
when we actually have these like logical, I don't want to say logical, but just like these tough discussions and really try to see, okay, this is what you want. How can we get that without my money? Two, how can we get that without taxes? Because when you really look at taxes, and this is the best way to explain it, if I were to die, that's tax base that is gone. I know how much I make, so that's shoot quite a few. Even though I work from, I really wish this was a perk. I wish taxes weren't taken out of my paycheck. That should be a perk for working for the government at least. But nevertheless,
Well, and that's a good point because they're paying you, you're paying them with their own money. Like why? Like I mean, that's a perfect example. Like why wouldn't they just say, okay, like I don't know how much you make, but let's say it's 40,000, right? Why wouldn't they just pay you 35,000 and say, well, you don't have to pay taxes because we're the government? Like doesn't that just seem to like add to this whole thing? Like this is all just bullshit.
it's definitely odd. Somebody asked me that too, and I was just like, you know what? I wish that was a perk, but when we get to that point where we can say like, hey, this is what we want. So if you want, libertarians, there's like mayor roads. If you want roads built, let's honestly look at how much we pay in taxes, what type of taxes we pay. So we look at sales tax, excise tax, income tax, property tax. How can we, if we can reduce it and really convince people to say, hey, you know what, we just need property taxes. I tell people to study Georgism, uh, because by pure definition, land is one of the few infinite, or should be, because if you don't have any land, you're more than likely not going to have any place to live, or the world won't exist. That's I guess, some form of altruism there, but to study Georgism and say, can we just function off of property taxes? Do something similar to Texas. If we got rid of like state income taxes here in Colorado, could we function? The answer would be yes. If we got rid of federal income tax, could we still function? The answer is yes. The difference between trying to convince people on how we can function is really to see how the money is allocated, like to all of these departments, like how after we collect it, how it is dispersed. And listening to Rand Paul, actually going to like, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to this stuff, so I can talk about this all day. But like, if you look at Tax Policy Institute and see how much money is actually brought in from taxes purely, a lot of the talking points that libertarians speak about are administrative costs and how that is a burden upon a lot of the taxpayers. Imagine, I tell people, based on the money that we get from Medicare alone, we could actually support universal health care. There needs to be no tax increases. So when you hear anybody say tax the rich, you don't really need to do that. It's all about management. It's all about allocation. And that's where I guess I have a little bit of uh, benefit, especially working in a department and understanding it, all the extra nuances, all the statutes and stuff like that. But people are like, wow, I literally pull it up on my phone and say, here, this is not my website. This is not something I'm making up. This is all public information. You can look at it yourself. Tell me what you think afterwards, and we can actually have a discussion rather than just throwing out platitudes saying, "Oh, people need this, people need that." Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. If your labor and my labor is determined by the government, so say, hey, this is how much money you have to pay based on what you make. I might not make that forever. This year I'm doing well. Next year I might be doing horrible. If you're relying solely upon my labor, if I'm doing bad next year, that means you're screwed too. If you're relying on tax revenue, and that's where I try to really get people to think beyond just taxes in general, because how can you feel that you're deserving of something that you're not willing to provide yourself? So I think
Right.
that's really where we
Well,
have.
I think that's a really important point too, because when you talk about property tax, whether you're in a rural area or in a city, when we have something like what happened with COVID, and like the government
Mm-hmm.
is saying you can't go to work, like that's not my fault. I want to go to work. It's your fault because you're saying I can't work, but they're still charging a property tax. And if you're renting, like, imagine if the government said, okay, if you're renting, if you own a building and you're renting it to people, you don't have to pay property tax, but you can take that out, but you have to lower their rent. Like that, this is the thing. You still have to keep paying your property tax, even though you
Mm-hmm.
can't go to work. So, just like you were saying, well, so you're depending on my income, but you're now telling me, oh, well, I can't live in the city if I don't have an essential job, if I'm not an essential employee, I have to get out of the city. Only essentials are allowed to live here now because those are the only people who are able to work. And you're basically forcing people out of their homes because of that. And it's like it's like it might not be COVID. It might be you get into an accident, or somebody gets sick and you have to take care of them. A million things can happen, but we have this cycle, especially, and people like to say income tax is slavery, and I actually disagree with that. I say property tax is slavery, because if you have everything, you go back to this idea of, all you need is land, right? You can live off the land, you can hunt, you can farm, you can, everything that you need is there. But if the government says you still need to pay a tax on it, now you're forced to go work somewhere to earn money in whatever currency to pay the government just for existing when they're not providing anything for you. And and yes, when you live in a city, there's other luxuries that come along with that you're working to pay for. But if anything, like you know unemployment comes along, if you still have to pay that property tax, that's them pulling the rug out from under you. So I see that one actually as the most offensive one, because whenever your income stream stops, the government isn't going to stop, and you're going to be now the victim of their tax policy. Whereas income tax is just like, okay, you earned $100, you got robbed on the way home, now you only have 70. Um, that's kind of where I see that difference there. But um, yeah, I think in a perfect world, like yeah, people can have jobs and all this other stuff, but how many of these jobs are created just to serve the tax system? And to your point about, like, you talk about like where all this, like how much money the government's actually bringing in. So here's a fun fact: the U.S. payroll, everybody's paychecks combined, is $8.5 trillion, and the total amount that all of the states and all of the federal government and all the cities bring in taxes is $7.5 trillion every year. That's 88%. Did you know that?
I've looked at that on the Tax Policy Institute, and just the total like amount of taxes. Yeah, when you like break it down by category, like sales tax, everything. Yeah,
It's
it's
insane.
it's.
And
I was gonna
here's
say
even
it's
crazier. Yeah.
yeah, it's out there.
I mean, well, because this is what I was gonna say is like so there's, at least at the beginning of this year, there was about $3.5 trillion of printed money in circulation. So they're taxing twice the amount of. Now think about this. Imagine if the government took all those taxes and never spent a dime. There would be no money in circulation in less than 6 months. Like
Yeah.
that's what that means. And so like it's I it, that's just like that just blows my mind because literally we are forced to depend on the government not only for, roads, but for money. We have to now work for the government for money just to pay them the taxes that we would have to pay. And it's like, what are you guys actually providing for us? Yeah, some smooth roads. Okay, fine. But like, are they really like, are they out there repaving every road every day? That's not really how it works. So, um, but anyways, I do absolutely like if you read this book, it's not a cheap book. I will buy you a copy because I really want to hear. I want to see if I can transform you from where you are now to where I am as far as tax goes. And I think, or maybe not completely, but especially on the income tax part. And I really want you to read this book and see where it goes. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, I'll read it.
All
You
right.
can you don't have to buy it. I can find it. I'm
All
sure I
right.
could.
Well,
Well,
all
if you
right.
buy it too, I'm not gonna. Christmas is coming
I
up too,
would.
so I'm not
Yeah.
gonna.
I would. No. I will. And then like the next time we meet, I'll sign it and everything. It'll be awesome. But read it. Come back on the show. We'll have another discussion, and I think that would be really awesome. Um, but man, yeah. No. So man, where do we go from here? um, I well and okay, I want to say this, right? Cuz like I'm having a conversation with you and I know this conversation would be totally different if like you were the tax guy like trying to get money out of me. I do want to say to people who might be listening to this that like take this into consideration. Um Raymond is like he's a human being. He's a man. He's not like sitting there like I'm gonna see how many of these Coloradans I can rip off today. Like that's not the situation that we're dealing with. And I know like if we were sitting face to face and you're telling me I gotta pay, like I would be singing a completely different tune. But that asshole. But
Yeah.
yeah, but like I think that's really important for us to understand because a lot of people are just like we get emotional, right? Like we see something we don't like and we're like we got to attack it and that person he's part of it. I see this within politics all the time, right? Oh, that Trump supporter, I hate him, I wish he would die. I hear people saying that about corona. You're not wearing a mask, I wish you would die. Well, the mask is like you're telling me yeah, like okay,
Yeah.
yeah, do you want me to die or not? Like um and so it's insane because like first of all it's not productive. And second, it's not like people are there like with absolute malicious intent. And if you treat them like they are, then like you're never gonna like convince anyone anything anyway. So, but here's another question I have for you. So you said that I got two questions for you. You said that there are people who would happily pay their taxes. Can those people pay more than what they're required?
Yes.
So they can just
That's
like send you a check.
so if they really want to give money directly to the government, at least on a federal level, you can do that. On a state level, I know it's possible. It's preferred that you donate it to nonprofit organizations, and I tell people like personally to donate it to nonprofit organizations because in
I'd
the
recommend that
taxability,
too.
yeah, it's much better. And by pure definition, the reason why they're deemed nonprofit, at least from taxation wise, is because they're providing a service that the government currently cannot either provide itself or it's not in a position uh, to work in that field or that industry as effective as someone else could. So I think that's where we really start to hear and understand the value of businesses in general because they're providing, a service that essentially the government is not there for. You look at phones. If I always I guess this is where, you and I will definitely full-heartedly agree on probably like no discernment, like no disagreement, nothing, is that when somebody else is able to provide a good or service that the majority of the public wants, if there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, people are going to buy it. People are going to actually go for it. They're going to get it. They're going to use it. In the story. When we ask the government to do something, I tell people all the time, if it's like me telling you that you have to do this. And if you don't, I can take it away. And I say that with like universal health care. I say that with anything because I don't know if this happened in Texas. I haven't really heard of anything happening there. But with the whole COVID situation, a lot of people who were sick, they really couldn't go to hospitals because they were actually denying people, unless it was COVID related, ability to go in there. And contrary to popular belief, a lot of these hospitals are either owned by definition, like if it's a university hospital, that is government property technically. They are a nonprofit institution, but it is government. Like University of Colorado, even since it is a public institution, a lot of people don't view it as a government institution, but it is. That is a government institution.
Right.
So it's government owned. And if they wanted to deny you, they could. And that's without universal health care. So they could tell you no right now. And if you go to like a nonprofit, based on if they start receiving grant money or any type of federal funds, same thing could apply there. One of the
Right.
reasons why I'm lucky enough to run for federal office or office in general, and I would love to see this. This is something I don't talk about on a campaign trail, just because nobody really wants to hear about it. But it's called the Hatch Act. It prevents a lot of people that are government employees from actually running for office, especially federal employees. So if you work for the Postal Service, if you work for, you know, the actual civil part of DOD, not necessarily reserves in the military like Tulsi Gabbard was, or so many others that serve like state positions. If you work for Social Security, Medicare, you cannot run for federal office. If you work for a state or a local agency and more than 50% of your salary is actually provided by federal funds, you cannot run for office. Now, how likely, at least on the state side or local side, is somebody going to do an actual audit to see where your money comes from? Highly unlikely, because I'm pretty sure
Well, it just takes
I'm
like
taking much time.
your one opponent to be like, "Oh, he works for the post office. We're gonna shut him down." I mean, that's really all it
Mm-hmm.
takes. Um, but yeah, but that is really fascinating because at the same time, it's like if you wanted somebody to be in charge and make rules regarding like the VA or Social Security or something, wouldn't you want somebody who like maybe worked there and like knows like yeah, this is where all the waste is going? I've been trying to
I
tell my
would,
supervisors, but they don't listen. Like, isn't like so? Why that's just like blows my mind. Why? Oh yeah, no. We gotta these postal workers. They're gonna create an uprising. We can't allow them to run for office. Like, who came up with that? That's insane.
well, Orrin Hatch, senator from Utah, a long time ago. And ironically, I mentioned the post office, but it was because of bribery. Somebody, tried to bribe a politician. Go figure, man. And
It happens.
I don't really know how that got passed, and how a lot of the like even with financial filings, like it spanned. When I read it, it's just amazing how it went from just that one thing, like historically, I don't know if there were any more things because obviously I wasn't around back in the 1930s. But the fact is that it spanned from a bribery standpoint, and then it got into like financial filings. It essentially determined who couldn't run for office, when they couldn't run for office. And I guess like even spanning that back into taxes, and your point of view saying, wouldn't you want somebody who actually knows how to change this particular department or even section where it could easily be improved, where people are complaining about the post office? A lot of the postmaster generals are have never worked there at all. You literally so you have them making decisions essentially based off of like one day walking in and say, okay, this can change, this can change, this can change, this can change
Uh,
instantly without knowing how it works. And I know we can get into like, knocking out the agencies, but imagine somebody who's worked on a dairy farm their entire life walking into a financial institution and saying, okay, this is what we're going to get
I
rid
want to
of.
be a
This is what
manager.
yeah, like it's to me it's illogical. It's it's asinine, really. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. That reminds me this cartoon I used to watch when I was a kid. I don't even remember what it was. There was this line that it was like this old guy, and like he just kept saying it over and over. He's like, they kept asking him like, he was flying a plane or something, and he's gonna like do some crazy stunt, and they're like, have you done this before? And he's like, nope, but I've seen it done a million times. Um, that was like his running gag. That's what this reminds me of. Okay, I got one more question for you, and then
Okay.
we'll wrap it up. Um, okay, you mentioned correctly if you don't file, the tax agency will take all the information that it has. It will come up with a report. It will do. I don't know if they call it an SBR, the same as the feds do, but you'll basically file a return saying this is how much you owe, and you'll send it to them with no deductions. So my question for you is, I don't know if it's the same form with the feds. It's the the 1099s and the W-2s. If
Mm-hmm.
you don't have those equivalent forms or the same forms, how do you come up with a bill to send somebody?
Uh, it's all of that would actually be based on those same forms. So granted, like there are certain states, I know Colorado is deemed a piggyback state. So we would actually use like on the bottom of the W-2, there is that state income tax portion. So the W-2 actually serves not only a federal purpose, but a state purpose. If you're, I guess,
But say it's under the table, so there are no forms sent to you or to the IRS. What
oh,
happens?
well, then at that point, you probably won't get caught. That's the easiest way of putting it. There are some in depth, I guess. That would be for,
Like a probate thing where they're like,
yeah, like you'd
where'd
have
all
to,
this money come from?
yeah, like if you started having like trying to buy cryptocurrency, and if you weren't really smart with it, you join like a app like Coinbase, which reports all the information to the government anyways. Yeah, so essentially, if you really wanted to, I'm not, this is my disclaimer here that
Not
I am
legal
not
advice.
for Department of Revenue. If you really wanted to, and you could get away with it. It just depends on, again, what you want to do in society. I would not suggest that you live in a metropolitan area and buy a house. You're probably going to have to rent. Go figure, make some friends because again, you can if you really wanted to, you could get away with it. Again, not I am not encouraging this lifestyle by any means, but if you really wanted to, you could.
All right, I just wanted to confirm that loophole was still there. All
Yeah,
right.
so
Raymond, it's been awesome having you on. Definitely, I'm going to send you that book. We'll have you back on. We'll have another conversation. This has been really fun. And I want to give you an opportunity, of course, to plug your website, your social media, ask for any help if you need any with your campaign, volunteers, donations. The floor is yours. Go for it.
yeah, absolutely. I know I'm an anomaly within the Libertarian Party here, working for the government, ironically, in taxation. So, yes, but I do believe in the principles. I would like to see limited government uh, be put in its place, make sure that efficiencies, because one thing I want people to understand is that the government is still made of people. It's just like regular society. If you can convince me, I'm pretty sure you can convince others, and we can actually get stuff done, address the issues that actually occur in society today. So the reason why I'm running, if you can see all of this on my website, doaneforcolorado.com, is DOANE number 4 Colorado.com. If you type in a word for, a word to, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. My name is very uncommon. I don't have a D at the end of my first name and a Y in the middle. So if you spell my name, you can easily find me on all three of those platforms. And again, I'm here to serve you. So I do need help. There was a generous donor that dropped off some signs, and I don't want them. I need them out of my house. I need them placed in yards or on the street. Somebody's enemy, give it to a dog. I don't really care. I'm not saying I don't care because I do care. I like the signs, and I'm gracious. I'm happy that they got them. They got them for a reason. So yeah, just hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. My phone has been vibrating like crazy. So if you call me, I might not answer. Text is the best. And yeah, we'll get this done. Continue to spread this message of liberty.
Awesome. And I do want to say for anybody listening, because I know I have some hardcore anarchists, we didn't all start there. I think what Raymon is doing is he is definitely in the direction of smaller government than what we have now. And the really awesome thing about that is that he can reach an audience that people like me can't. Because to them, I just look like a crazy anarchist. And what? Less government? This guy wants no government. That's insane. So I really do appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm sure you're going to reach a lot of people and help bring them over to our side. And then I'm going to help bring them even further. I'm going to bring you even further. But awesome. Yeah, like I said, it's been awesome having you on. If you enjoyed this show, please make sure to share it with your friends. Share it on Facebook and YouTube. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, make sure you're subscribed. And, of course, head on over to taxationistheft.info and help us out by getting one of our really awesome T-shirts or any of the cool stuff that we have. We actually just released, you can find these on there now, a luggage tag that says definitely not drugs. So as you pass it through the airport and as TSA is watching it go over the conveyor belt, you're probably going to waste their time and save somebody else who's smuggling lots of drugs through TSA. I'm kidding. That's not legal advice, again. But they're really fun to put on there. And Taxation is Theft. I will see you guys next time.